My, how things can change in an instant. To anyone in the fan base that woke up on the morning of July 25th, 2024, they probably weren't expecting much. It had been 4.5 months since the news of Rooster Teeth shutting down, and while there were plans for the team to sell the franchise to another party, there had been no real news on that front. Then, they found out that the team had found new ownership for the show. Themselves! And only a few days later, a Kickstarter had been put up for the show to essentially fund itself for a year, with sponsorships to help pay for bigger and better episodes later. It didn't even take 30 minutes before the show was fully funded, and soon, it became a matter of funding the stretch goals, with the first preview of the new independent era coming out on September 22nd of that year. And on a personal note, the tail end of 2024 and the entirety of 2025 was honestly a roller coaster for me. But the show more than helped me to get through it. So, with all that, let's see just how well they did. This is Wolf's Top 16 Death Battle episodes of 2024 and 2025. Oh look, it's a dead horse. Let's beat it.
You are a monster no longer. I never was.
It really is a shame that this episode ended up being a bad one, considering how much hype this episode could have had. Not only was this one of the finalists for the Tournament of Champions, but it also features Kratos, who people wanted to see return ever since the PS4 game came out. Add on to that the fact that Asura was also someone people wanted to see show up on the show for a while, and you can see how this episode would have had so much hype behind it. So to see it just be so not good, massive disappointment. The biggest problem is the animation, really. Now, I know that Devil Artemis has not liked the way he's received criticism on his episodes as of late, and it's caused him to basically say that his next episode he animates for the series is the last one he'll be animating. To be fair, not everything wrong with this episode is exclusively his fault. But I'm sorry, DA, this really isn't a good animation, and I know you prefer to hear actual criticism with your work, so I'll try my best to actually critique it. There's very little happening in this fight, which I want to chalk up to just how straightforward Asura's fighting style is. Punch a whole lot, and when that doesn't work, power up and punch even harder until he gets to his final form. That's not really easy to make interesting, especially compared to Kratos, who has a whole arsenal to animate and makes things look interesting as a result. But there's still other problems with the animation. Some of the movements feel very stiff and unnatural, especially for the way these specific characters move. Some of the shots are very awkwardly angled too, like this shot of Kratos about to catch Asura's attack. And some shots just look really weird. To be fair, this is probably the one blemish on Devil Artemis's otherwise solid animation record, but everyone's got a dud on them, and this is his. But like I said, not everything wrong with this fight can be pinned solely on him. The dialogue writing is a problem too. I doubt that was much of DA's doing, since he doesn't have any writing credits on this episode. Even if it's the fight dialogue, that's the problem, because the writing for Wiz and Boomstick is actually pretty decent. Also, there's the voice acting, which is not great. Hussein Muhammad and Christopher Guerrero do a good job sounding like Christopher Judge and Liam O'Brien respectively, but not enough to sound like their characters. Okay, that's a little weird. Let me try and explain it better. Chris Guerrero has done plenty of voice acting that mimics Liam O'Brien. In fact, this isn't even the first time he's voiced a character in Death Battle that Liam has officially voiced, because he was Gaara's voice actor back in Season 2. But while he sounds like Liam, he doesn't sound like Asura, if that makes any sense. His voice is too deep, too scratchy. It just sounds like a guy shouting a lot. Heck, I'd have assumed he was voicing Akuma more than he was voicing Asura. That same kind of criticism goes for Hussein. He's got the pitch and stuff down to sound like Christopher Judge's voice for Kratos, but not enough to sound like Kratos. I think his voice is a little too deep as well, and it doesn't get the right inflections across mainly. Am I getting my point across accurately? I don't know. However, despite all of this might be the least bad of all the episodes I've considered bad across the show's history, and it all boils down to one thing. Wraithy. I think I'm pronouncing that right.
Ready.
This song is actually a good backing track and a good solo track. It's very action-packed at times, but it has enough somber moments with Donna Caruthers' voice that it really does reflect the characters these two are, and it fits what's happening on screen. Seriously, it's a very well-made song, and it was almost enough to salvage this episode. Almost. Speaking of finalists for the Tournament of Champions, and 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Tournament of
I was
Champions!
expecting that, and I still got surprised.
Wile E. Coyote, super genius.
So, I was not a fan of this episode idea at first. It just felt kinda bland. I wasn't sure why people were voting in favor of it, especially in comparison to other episode ideas that it went up against. But when this episode finally came out, I was right. This wasn't a great idea. Granted, it's not a bad episode, just okay. One thing I will give it credit for is the animation itself. Like, from start to finish. It's pretty dang good, all things considered. The way the fight is structured is great. The use of classic gags from both Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry. What little voice acting Billy had. It was solid. And that's where my praise kinda stops. Everything else was just kinda meh. The writing was meh, besides maybe one or two jokes that are pretty good. Other than that, it's fairly by the numbers at best, or kinda annoying at worst. The music is kinda okay. I'm not gonna count the fact that it's not a great solo track, because, like TGIH, it's expected. That song uses a technique called Mickey Mousing, so it's expected that it'll be better as a backing track than it will be a solo track. Also, while I do like the animation, the big problem I have with it is the fact that once Tom lost all of his lives, that's kinda where you knew he was going to lose. All in all, this is just a super meh episode. And speaking of supers...
Go beyond! Spider-Man, you really are the ultimate.
I was debating which one I thought was more meh and should be higher between this entry and the last. because a large chunk of Coyote vs. Tom was actually pretty good, if flawed, while a lot of this was just not great. I have several problems with this episode's production. First things first, the animation is just kinda okay. It looks great, don't get the wrong idea. Miles and Deku both look amazing. Their character models are animated very well. They're very mobile in the ways they move. It's very stylish. When things are happening, anyway. The problem is that there really feels like a lot of nothing going on in a lot of this fight, and it feels kinda dull because of that. Not helped is the fact that I wasn't a fan of the voice acting in this one. I praised the voice acting that Cal Jordan and Jose Estrada did for Miles and Deku respectively in their previous outings, but I can't say the same for Christian Marte and John Van Doren in this one. Both of them sound kinda phoned in, especially John's voice for Deku, which sounds a little too whiny throughout. Also, You Say Danger is just a meh song altogether. I can't even really praise it as a backing track because the song is just there. There's nothing to get me hyped about it. But there's one thing that saves this episode in my opinion. The writing is absolutely phenomenal. Seriously, this is a very well-written episode, with plenty of good lines, funny jokes, and mad respect for both Spider-Man and Deku. Even the idea on how the fight progresses when the two break out certain attacks is great. If the animation and voice acting could have highlighted this, that would have been a good episode, at the very least. But, unfortunately, it's just an okay episode. Oh, look, another joke episode that I don't think is very good. Yay! Much like Coyote vs. Tom, I wasn't a fan of this idea, and it's why I wasn't looking forward to this episode once it was announced. In fact, this one and Coyote vs. Tom were right next to each other in front of Kratos vs. Asura when it came to my initial thoughts. Rewatching it for this list, it did improve a little, but not nearly enough for me to consider it more than just meh. To its credit, it was a lot better than that little proof of concept preview they released a few years ago looked like, but that's not saying much. The big problem is that when there are parts about this episode I like, they're very half-done. The writing is great in the Fall Guys portion, and even the episode itself. But the Among Us section's writing was very cringe, even as someone who has played this game quite frequently, as you have seen on this channel before. The only thing I liked from that part was pointing out just how weird the crewmates and imposters are biologically. The music was great as a backing track, actually really hyping up moments, but on its own it's just kinda meh, and I do not like the title being Sussy Beans. Just no. About the only thing that I can actually give kudos to this episode for is the animation itself, which is actually pretty cool with all the things that the crewmates, imposters, and Fall Guys tend to do. It's a great looking fight, but it's dragged down by things around it being of lesser quality compared to the others. Alright, into the airlock it goes. No, we're still not done with the meh episodes. And this one actually started a three-peat of them.
Green Lantern fly! Let's see you grit those teeth! You'd make a good lantern.
Simon of Earth, you have been chosen.
Just who the hell do you think I am?
Whew, boy, I know some of you are going to hate me for this one. To be fair, unlike some of the other meh fights this season, I actually was kinda hyped about this one. This fight was a neat idea, especially considering these two are some of the most busted characters Death Battle has ever had, and when I initially saw it, I thought it was good. But when I rewatched this episode for this list, I started to notice that, like with the previous episode, there are some things that they do only half right. Like with Spider-Man vs. Deku, the animation looked neat. There was a lot of flashiness and style at certain parts of this, like Kyle copying Simone's idea of using drills by having drills from each of his ring colors form into a Giga Drill, or Simone having a boxing match between Gurren Lagann and a lantern construct of Balrog from Street Fighter. But then there were moments that were kinda awkwardly looking in animation, like this shot of Kyle surrounded by the life equation, or parts where I was kinda feeling bored because there wasn't a lot happening on screen. I thought the voice acting from Kyle was great. Simone, not so much. Kieran just doesn't sound enough like Yuri Lowenthal to really sell me on his voice for Simone, including the famous drill that will pierce the heavens line that he needed to sell just as a baseline for a good Simone voice. The writing in the fight was good in a lot of moments with some decent jokes and that one-on-one between Simone and Kyle. But did they really need to have like 8 different references to Gurren Lagann in it? Something tells me Swan was a little too excited about that part. Also, was it really necessary to bring up the fridging trope? The one thing that probably drags this up from being near the bottom though, 3 words: Spiral of Emotion! Sure, it's no Will of the Trail, but that was going to be a tough song to top, and the song itself is still extremely hype regardless. I almost had this in the good category for that alone too. Unfortunately, it just missed out on that.
When the Kickstarter launched, they advertised 2 episodes that they were going to make with the initial Kickstarter money. And the first episode they said they were going to make...
Your time is up! Saiyan!
You said Saiyan. Remember it. Fuck.
Oh boy, let's talk about this episode. What might be the most controversial episode of this new era so far. I liked it! Okay, yeah, it has its problems, but I still had fun with it. First things first, let's start with the positives. The animation was solid. Admittedly, there wasn't a lot that either of these two were doing in the fight, but given how early into the new era that this was, I'm willing to give it a pass. They were probably still finding their footing, and Devil Artemis did have 2 fights he was working on at once. But when they were doing stuff, it was fun. Each attack felt like it was actually doing something when it did land. Even to Omni-Man, who, last time he was on, basically just wiped the floor with his opponents. One strength of DA's work is that he really knows how to sell each blow that characters in a fight land, even if an attack does nothing to that opposing character, and this is no exception. Hell, the creative use of both of Bardock's transformations also were quite a positive for me. Part of what also makes this episode great is the writing, which is pretty neat as well. The way Omni-Man and Bardock interact is great. There's not really any moments that make me roll my eyes at any bad jokes or references. It's solid writing all around. And fricking hell, Tom's voice for Nolan is almost 1-to-1 with J.K. Simmons, especially in this episode, somehow improving his performance since last time.
And then there's Bardock.
I like Cameron as a voice actor, don't get the wrong idea, but if he was trying to go for Sonny Strait, he kinda missed by a good 3 feet and somehow landed on a John DiMaggio impression instead. And while I like John DiMaggio, I don't think that voice works here. Also, I feel like I need to address the massive elephant in the room and bring up the Sun Disk incident. I've brought up time and time again here that I don't care about whether a fight is accurate unless the research is either showing massive improvement from before or it's so bad that I can't ignore it. And unfortunately, this is one of those cases. People in the community, even ones who have defended other controversial episodes for their research like Ben 10 vs. Green Lantern, will not let anyone forget about the research for this, including addressing the Sun Disk they used to say that Omni-Man was stronger and more durable. Yeah, I gotta admit, the research here is extremely shaky, even at some of the best of times, especially considering the way these two are scaled, and it does hurt my overall feeling. Some people probably still think this episode should be down in the bottom of the list, if it weren't for the one thing that even they like. Solid State Invincible. Hot damn, this song kicks ass and gets you hyped. I can't say this is better than Diabolical Invincible Me, but it's definitely on par, and that song was already a banger of a song. That song alone was just enough to put this episode into the good category. Just saying.
Alongside episodes that were promised to us directly, some of the Kickstarter stretch goals included episodes that would be worked on with people who had worked on the series previously. We already saw one example with Luis working on Wile E. Coyote vs. Tom Cat. For another example,
Looks like you got ahead of yourself.
While I don't know how many people expected that this would be the Ismahawk episode, I feel like this is an episode that could only really work as an Ismahawk fight. After all, both these characters are most well known for their live-action media, even if they've been in other types. And honestly, they did a great job with this being live-action. The choreography looks great. I mean, it's going to when you've got someone like Fiction being involved in production, let alone Ismahawk. The writing is phenomenal too, with some genuine laugh-out-loud funny moments during the rundown, and the fight's own little storyline being very well put together. Admittedly, it feels weird that Buffy's basically on the back foot for the majority of this fight until the end, but that also kinda just feels like a typical Buffy episode anyway. Also, while not entirely related, bonus points to having some of the actual DB team making cameo appearances in the episode itself, including having Ben be the vampire DJ that did exactly what a DJ is supposed to do in this situation, have some badass music when everything's going down. Speaking of music, I'm also kind of a fan of Neon Ash. I say kind of because, like previous tracks for live-action fights, it's better as a backing track than a solo one, but I think it's still better than Devil of the Night or Red Winter. I especially like how it uses the rave music from the Wesley Snipes Blade film and the theme song of Buffy the Vampire Slayer's TV series mixed in really well. Still, that does lead me to some problems I have with this. While the choreography is great, the acting is a little on the weaker end. Mara Mulroney does a pretty good job with her line reads, but yeah, she doesn't really look like Buffy all that much. Although, really, getting anyone who was going to look enough like Sarah Michelle Gellar to play Buffy was going to be a tough act. Fiction, though...
Jude's just a kid!
Not anymore.
Yeah, I can't overlook this. Look, Fiction is a cool dude. He's a skilled fighter, and it's clear he knows how to do stunt fighting as well as real fighting. But his acting left a lot to be desired. I was willing to overlook the fact that his version of Blade looks nothing like any version we've seen before, if it weren't for the fact that he sounds nothing like any version we've heard before. His voice range is too high. Blade needs a deeper voice, meant to be more edgy and lone wolf-like. This version of Blade sounds like he's trying to get big on SoundCloud by dropping his new rap track, and that just doesn't feel right. Even Fiction's own reaction video points this out.
Baby boy Blade.
Baby boy Blade. Okay, look, guys.
Again, no disrespect to Fiction, he seems like a great dude, and if it weren't for who he was trying to play, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But regardless, this was still a fun episode. One I'll be happy to sink my teeth into anytime soon.
Isn't it funny how after this episode got released, a few months later, they said that Hulk's first episode was wrong?
You did it, big guy. We did it.
This was another fight idea I'll admit that I wasn't totally on board with, at least at first, but it eventually grew on me after it was made the next time. And honestly, it was a great, exciting episode. This had plenty of moments that made the hype and wait worth it, in my opinion. The big thing for me was the animation. This fight looked intense, and I loved the models they used especially. The way the fight flows really does feel like two titans battling each other. Fun fact, the official Death Battle Discord has a section where we talk about sports, and whenever a game is extremely close, we use shots of Hulk attacking Godzilla and then breaking through the green door whenever one continues. And then when one team finally wins, we use the killing blow of Bruce's gauntlet device. That's a good sign of how great the animation was. It was also a sign of the quality of the writing for the fight itself. The writing as a whole was pretty good, with some great jokes in the rundowns and the fight itself written to be very intense. I even love how they included Bruce in the actual fight when it was only Hulk for his previous two appearances, as well as the fact that he was written as the winner since he was ultimately the deciding factor. Speaking of Hulk's previous appearances, while I don't think Blythe Mellon did as good of a voice for Hulk as Richard Barsanis, he still did a great job, especially since he also provided a pretty good job voicing Banner. My only major problem with this episode was Madness of the Monster, which is very much good backing track, just kinda okay as a solo track. But it's still a great episode, one that I think smashed expectations.
Of all the fight ideas that I've not really been a fan of in this show's history, this might be the idea that I disliked the most. And yet I enjoyed this one.
Pikachu, let's finish this together!
You activated my trap card, Magic Cylinder! With it, I'll send your Thunderbolt back to attack your life points directly! That was an awesome duel, Ash.
The fact that this went from episode 200 to season finale was, in my opinion, for the best. Given what episode 200 ended up being, I feel like this would need as much time as possible, and episode 200 would be fitting with what it became. To see two of my childhood's characters battle against one another still hurts, but the way it was done was great. The animation was pretty good. Admittedly, it wasn't as great as other army fights we've had before this, and it's mainly because a lot of army fights tend to be just, this character attacks another and they either block it or kill instantly, and this one was a little weak even in that regard. Still, the characters all looked really good as they moved. The attacks still felt fluid and fast, the way the models really blend together well, and I even love the subtle things about this episode, like seeing Oshawott have a clear crush on Silent Magician, just like he had a crush on female Pokemon throughout Black and White. Bless you adorable little otter. Also, this kinda helped with my very big worries about this episode, mainly being how some of Ash's Pokemon were going to interact with some of Yugi's cards. The music was phenomenal. Millennial Monsters was a great song that used plenty of references to Pokemon's various songs in both the games and anime, as well as parts of Yu-Gi-Oh's soundtracks, all while being sung by Jason Page, the guy that sang the original Gotta Catch 'Em All theme from the English dub of Pokemon. As for the voice acting, Elsie Lovelock did a fantastic job voicing Ash, and Tom Schalk sounded great too. As a Tem. As Little Yugi, not so much. I get that voice actors for Yugi have voiced both himself and a Tem before, but Tom doesn't have a voice range that can go high enough to make Yugi sound right. But the biggest thing I love about this episode is the writing. I've mentioned before how previous episodes show how far the research has come, but I think in this case, the writing shows how far the show has come instead. Compare this episode to, say, Pikachu vs. Blanca, where it felt like the majority of that episode was basically crapping on how bad of a trainer Ash is, or how Pikachu is pathetically weak even when he isn't. Or take the ending of Pokemon vs. Digimon, where they just decide to brutally murder both Red and Charizard, and where they just referred to Red training Pokemon as slavery. Here, not only is Ash given massive respect, it's also far more than he had ever had before he won the Alola League. Meanwhile, they actually addressed the constant allegations of Yugi cheating that all the anime fans will joke about. If this episode had been an episode under the first 2 or 3 seasons, this would have been written very differently, and I honestly worry what that would look like. Even the death was very respectful and even seemed like it was reversible. Ash and his team turned into stone, which is not only a good and respectable reference, but it possibly could have ended as soon as their battle was done. They didn't cause a massive slaughter against his entire team, and Yugi even gives him some props for how awesome their duel was. Which is also another big thing. It's not a Tem that finishes the fight. It's Yugi, showing the development from after his series ended. He doesn't need a Tem to be a great duelist, he just needs his own ability and his belief in the heart of the cards. There were still some issues that made it unable to go past great, but given how much of a monster of a fight this was, there was no puzzle of how good it was.
A lot of people thought that this episode was going to be in the theoretical Season 11 when they saw the tarot cards after Galactus vs. Unicron. Or at least thought that we might have a tarot card teaser like we had with the Cypher to start Season 10. Regardless, glad to see that this was still made. Even if we did see it coming.
Maybe you didn't hear me before.
Checkmate.
This was a fun episode and very close to fantastic for me. There's so many exciting things going on in this fight. People have wanted a Persona vs. JoJo episode for some time, and I think this was the perfect one, just because of how much we see both characters able to do. That really helped out a lot with the animation, which looked really, really good. I love when a sprite fight is so beautifully animated that sometimes you forget that it's a sprite fight, and this is one of the best examples of that. There are plenty of hype moments throughout it, thanks in part to the writing. With the amount of wild things going on in both of these franchises, especially in the entry these two specifically come from, the fact that they referenced some of those wild moments, like how one of the people you can bond with in Persona 5 is Joker's teacher, or just the entire insanity of explaining how the hell King Crimson works to even the most dedicated of JoJo fans is great. But of course, the way Joker and Giorno react to each other's abilities is also very well done too. But the sound design is, in my opinion, the best part of this entire episode, bar none. Kevin Rivera and Kieran Reagan absolutely killed it in the voice acting part, especially Kieran's voice for Gold Experience. However, regardless of how well they performed, it's Brandon Yates who really stole the show. Pun not intended. Requiem for a Thief was a phenomenal song, getting the perfect vibe of the jazz music Persona 5 soundtrack contains, and mixing in the piano section of El Vento d'Oro once GER entered into the picture to make such a phenomenal song. Also, major shout out to Saoirse, aka O Forest Child, because her singing was almost a perfect double for Lin Inazumi. The only complaint I do have about this episode, some of the attacks felt very weak. Like, they didn't have a lot of force behind them most of the time. Still, even with letting that flaw stand, I'm certainly glad this episode's production wasn't the last surprise that the team had for us in the season. The fifth rematch of a previous episode in the show's history, and like almost all of them, it was a thrill to watch.
Sorry, Guga vs. Superman 2, you're still not a good episode. But this one is.
Chief, still with me?
I know that this episode is one that, after it was made, a lot of people weren't exactly happy with, which is kind of ironic given how the original got plenty of hate for being wrong even at the time it was made. And yet, regardless of that fact, I actually really liked this. This episode had so many fun things going on with it, and it borders on fantastic because of how much fun it was. Starting with the writing, this was an episode that I think even originally was written fairly well. In the original Chief vs. Doom guy, both characters were given plenty of respect, even if it was clear that Boomstick was a massive Doom fanboy and was hoping to have him win over Master Chief. That's still done here too, only while also giving both rundowns the glow up that they need, given how much Season 1 weirdness was involved in the original Chief vs. Doom guy, and with no disrespect to anyone, except maybe Paramet, who definitely didn't understand Chief at all, so it was well deserved. I even really liked the way the characters were written, and speaking of the characters, everyone's voice was actually solid overall. I'm especially a fan of Philip Sacramento's voice for Chief and Kira Buckland's voice for Cortana. Yes, you heard right, that Kira Buckland! She sounds so much like Jennifer Hale that it's insane. Really, besides her first voice acting performance on the show, Kira's been a solid and reliable voice for female characters throughout the series. Of course, we can't leave out what little voice acting Johnny Matragrano had for Slayer or Yang Ya's work as Vega, because they both did a great job too. Then there's the animation, which was absolutely action-packed. Granted, both Chief and Slayer move a little too fast in it, but I'm willing to ignore that because of how much action they put into what was effectively a straight-up gunfight. The amazing use of their weapons, the little temporary truce when the two end up in hell, the various references to both in regards to the poses and Easter eggs they had, it was great. And of course, we have Halo to Hell, which is a very well put together song by Brandon Yates, Matt Burnell, David Levy, and, returning in all their glory, the Death Battle Fan Choir, whose role in this song is admittedly smaller than it was in Fireborn, but who still did a good job. So, why isn't this higher? Well, say it after me, folks. This is the episode that's only lower on the list because I just like the other episodes more. However, this also falls under the category of the other episodes are higher because they just do one or two things extra. So it's a twofer when it comes to the standard category episodes get when it comes to my lists. Other than that, yeah, this is a great episode, one that certainly gives me the excitement to rip and tear through the rest of this list until it is done.
As soon as they said that Ash vs. Yugi was being delayed, I knew this was going to be episode 200. And it honestly deserved it.
The wavelengths. Damn it, she's... Stay strong, Maka! You got this!
A simple, honest soul. Ruby Rose, huh?
Of the 4 Ruby-themed episodes we've had on the show, this is by far the best one. Granted, giving my feelings on the rest of them, and one episode in particular, that wasn't exactly a high bar to clear, but this episode didn't just clear it, it almost redeemed the show's appearance in Death Battle entirely. This episode was phenomenal, and one that I don't think I've seen anyone complain about. That's how good it was. Where to begin with this one? Well, how about the writing? This episode was written amazingly in pretty much every regard. The characters were written amazingly, with Ruby just being such an excited cinnamon roll throughout most of the fight, and even providing some hilarious shipping material for Maka and Soul. And speaking of, they were written perfectly, Maka being the very serious one, and Soul being more laid back until near the end there. It was perfect. It really makes you wish Monty was here to view the episode he personally requested Ben and Chad to make. Like this episode was written in homage to their long-gone friend, especially at the end after the next time is announced. Speaking of Monty, the music feels like it was meant to honor him as well, even with it having been 10 years since his passing. Death in Bloom is such a beautiful song, but also an intense one, fusing together to make an absolute bop. The rock guitar throughout, the piano work in the Adagio version, and the lyrics sung by both Casey Lee Williams of Devil Trigger fame and VTuber Maria Schultz singing in Japanese for Maka makes for a perfect combo. And those lyrics too. Not just putting in Monty's old catchphrase, but even the lyric of "I wish that you could see me now." I know that's a reference to Summer Rose, but it's like that was written either to Monty from the perspective of Ben, Chad, Ruby herself, or some combination. Or it was written to Ben and Chad's past selves, seeing how far the show has come in 15 years and over 200 episodes. It's beautiful. But what good would an episode like this be if it didn't have amazing animation? So many great moments happening throughout. Ruby suddenly whipping out Crescent Rose's sniper mode, the chase on the rooftop, Soul's performance when he's doing Soul Adagio, and even the ending. The amount of times in this season, especially that have ended with the winner giving nothing but respect to their opponent, is amazing. It's such a touching way to respect the characters and the people who are fans of them. To say nothing of the great voice acting that they had from Lindsay Jones, Ginger Sue, and John Van Doren. The only downside I have with this one, and it's a rather minor one in the grand scheme of things for this episode, is the big scythe clash between Ruby and Maka, which is very underanimated. But honestly, if that's the only complaint I have, I'm more than willing to keep moving forward, especially with how much this episode provided. A lot of resonance for this one.
They actually did it. They had a character from Final Fantasy be on the show that was from an entry other than 7. I honestly didn't think they had it in them.
Please, just once. I need more.
It's been a bash, Smokey. Jackpot! I need every... Not bad. Not bad at all.
After a fight like this, that guard will be nothing.
So, fun fact, before this episode, Final Fantasy XVI was one of the only mainline Final Fantasy games I hadn't actually played through. I was putting it off for various reasons, but as soon as I saw this fight as next time, I had to play it. There was no other choice. I spent weeks dodging spoilers, not just for the story of the game, but for the episode itself. And honestly, it was well worth it! This fight was freaking amazing! The episode was top-notch, but in this case, it's the way Dante and Clive themselves are written that's the highlight. The two are written perfectly in character, and I loved seeing the two interact. Both of them snarking at each other, though Dante doing most of that snark. The way they react to each other's abilities, and the way their final clash at the end is written is pretty much perfect. And with two action-oriented game characters like these two, who have the same combat director for their games, you know that the animation has to be good to live up to what both can do, and my god, that it is! This fight is so freaking hype, and it looks so stunning, with both using so many of their abilities that I would have been super disappointed if they didn't do that. The only real issue I have is the way Clive's eyes look in certain parts. They look kinda glossy, and it takes me out of things for a split second whenever they get a close-up of his face. Still, I'm not surprised the two move as amazingly as they do. After all, this was a Torian episode, and he did both of these two justice. And the voice acting is great too. Luca Xavier may not have been as great as Stephen Fu was with Dante's last appearance, but he still did a great job. Same thing with Will DeRenzi Martin, who, while taking a little getting used to, did almost as good of a voice acting job for Clive as Ben Starr did. This was a solid episode, and I know some people would have liked it to get higher. It wasn't quite that dominant for me, but I'd certainly be a devil if I didn't give it the props that it deserved.
You know, re-watching these episodes for this list, they were about in the same place as what I had them in my initial thoughts. A couple episodes went down a peg or two, but for the most part, the list stayed about the same. And then there's this episode that got probably the biggest boost out of all of them, because I remembered how freaking awesome it was!
Al Simmons, your sins are innumerable. I am here to wreak vengeance upon your soul. I eat sin for breakfast. Have a taste of your own goddamn medicine.
Lies. Here's the Prince of Lies. Wait, I'm an innocent.
It's like you said, nothing personal, asshole.
Wow, this episode was badass! I still had positive thoughts about it in my initial rating, but on rewatch, yeah, this fight's a rush! This entire fight was a thrill that you would expect from these two characters. Part of that is the voice acting that both of these two had. Stephen Kelly is one of the few characters this season that returned and had the same voice actor, and honestly, I think he might have done an even better job than in Ghost Rider vs. Lobo. However, the star of this show is definitely Ray Hurd. Is he going to be a perfect imitation of Keith David? Of course not. But I don't think anyone could match that legend's voice. And even then, Ray Hurd gave it the damnedest that he had trying to. Again, pun not intended. The animation was also a major highlight for this fight. It moved as fast as it needed to. The two fought perfectly with the styles that they had, and despite the fact that they could have included more of Spawn's abilities, they gave him all the ones that were really needed, including showing off some of the ones they didn't show him using in his fight against Kratos. Of course, Ghost Rider has plenty of exciting moments as well, and the Zarathos part of the fight even felt evenly split with Johnny's sections for this episode compared to in Season 6, which makes sense when you consider Zarathos' power is one of the few advantages Ghost Rider had in this fight. The writing, top notch. Granted, it felt like Johnny's rundown was a little too harsh on him at times, and a little too frequently, but not so bad that it was noticeable, at least at first. The fact that they really sold how awesome these characters are, with the cool things that they can do, and just how powerful they are, is definitely an upside. And the dialogue in this episode is just, fantastic! But the real highlight of this episode, Hell's Angels! The thing that held back Ghost Rider vs. Lobo in my Season 6 list, if you'll recall, was that Ride into Hell was one of those songs that was good for a backing track, but not a good solo track. This time, though, yeah, they definitely hit this one out of the park. A heavy metal song that befits the hellish nature of these two is exactly what was needed, and with some lyrics this time, too. The only problem I have with this episode is a very minor one that's not even their fault. The fact that they had to censor one of Spine's lines from "Welcome to Hell, motherfucker," which is a reference to another Keith David performance. If they didn't censor it, while it would have been awesome, it also would have meant that the episode would have been age-restricted and thus been demonetized. Sometimes I really do hate this website, as it really feels like hell.
I think this might be the only time in the series that both fan bases have wanted one specific character to win a fight. That just shows you how much people hate Mahito.
I felt your soul too. You only hate humanity because you were born that way. Totally random. I hate them for a reason. You grow up.
This fight. This fight gives me chills. Good chills. This fight was so creepy and disturbing. You'd think that it was meant as a Halloween episode. It was fantastic, and I loved it. The big thing that makes this episode succeed is the animation. There is a lot going on in this, and it's a rush watching the whole thing. Such a rush, in fact, that you might miss some of the subtle things, like the fact that whenever Shigaraki takes damage, you actually see him lose one of his vestiges. It's something I didn't realize at first, but other people did take notice of the subtleties. I mean, when you have people actually taking notice of a character that only has screen time for like 3 seconds before they're off, that means people were absolutely loving what they were seeing, even from the start. I also love the voice acting in this episode, from both Tom Schalk as Shigaraki and Sean Chiplock as Mahito. Tom's almost always going to have a good performance, but seeing the Sean Chiplock in this episode, while I know it made one friend of mine not very happy, was still very exciting. It was great hearing the performances of these two, who nailed their personalities pretty perfectly with their performances. But the music. Oh my goodness, that music. Skin Deep is a frantic, exciting, and sometimes rather frightening hard rock song that gets across exactly how screwed anyone would be if they came across either of these two, and really nails down their characters with its tone. Admittedly, I don't understand the lyrics since I can't speak Japanese, and I know that My Hero Academia music, even in Japanese, is usually sung with English singers, but I think it still works wonders. But the writing, oh my god, the writing on this one was fantastic. The rundowns got across how much of a threat these guys were, but also made you actually feel bad for Shigaraki with everything he's dealt with in the series, while also making you absolutely afraid of what Mahito is able to do. What's more, it gets across the personalities of these two pretty great as well, enhanced by the great voice actors they had. Really, this one was extremely well made, and it probably could have been handed number 1 in almost any season besides this one, but, well, only one could top it. Look, I know that some of you guys actually seem to like whenever I have an opinion that goes against the norm of the rest of the community. I can tell you that I don't try to have a different opinion with what they say, and I'm glad that my willing to go against what everyone else is thinking is refreshing for some of you, to the point that you guys are willing to share your own opinions, either in the live chats when these lists premiere, like right now, or in the comments of the videos on this list. But I couldn't do that this time. This episode gets the praise that it does, and with good reason. The hardest thing when it comes to talking about this episode is trying to figure out where to start when talking about it. Well, let's start with that writing. The writing on this one was phenomenal. I talked about Ash getting a much better treatment compared to previous episodes. How about freaking Bowser? Bowser was kind of treated as a complete dumbass who didn't deserve any of his popularity in his fight with Ganon. Now, not only is he given the respect he deserves, but they even make him seem like a badass and a threat. Eggman got a bit of a glow up too, considering he didn't get overshadowed this time by Metal Sonic. These two characters acted exactly how they would if they actually fought. People also realized the pattern in this one. Bowser was often in the fray and advancing forward with his attacks, while Eggman was always falling backwards and letting his forces do most of the work, which makes perfect sense for their characters. Then there's the voice acting. Zach Watkins did a perfect portrayal of Bowser and really made him come across as both a king worthy of being followed and a dad who cares about his kids more than anything else. And he would have made both Kenny James and Jack Black proud. While Eggman's actor, Arthur Romeo, got across Eggman's own gleefulness and even the concern he had seeing Sage getting attacked while in the Death Egg. He had the perfect mix of Mike Pollock and Dean Bristow, and I loved it! And then, of course, there's the animation. This episode was the first look we got at Morrow's hand-drawn work for the show, and my god, he's done such a fantastic job this season with every fight he's animated. Animating an entire army of people at once like this, though, especially in hand-drawn animation, isn't easy, and yet he managed to make it look like it was nothing. So many great moments in this fight that if I had to list them all, I'd just be summarizing the fight word for word. Seriously, I can't even pick out specifics. The whole fight was animated amazingly from start to finish. And all of this on its own was more than enough to get at the top spot on this list. But the final touch was the original track for this episode, Game Over. It's not enough that this song sounds like a fantastic villain theme for both Bowser and Eggman. It's not enough that this song had great lyrics for both that really sounded like they were fighting with words as well as with their attacks. It's not even enough that they got Victor Borba, the guy whose best known work is the badass and edgy rock theme we call Bury the Light. No, it's this stat that made me realize it. Back in early December, YouTube decided to try and copy Spotify and give you a rundown of how you spent the year on the website, and included in that is music that you listen to if you listen to a lot. I have a playlist of over 2,500 songs that I always put on play whenever I'm out and about, so naturally, I received this ranking. In my top 5 are 3 songs that typically get played first on my YouTube playlist. Also, a recent song from Ninja Sex Party that's just great. And at the top, Game Over. A song that I will actively seek out whenever I can, on top of one that got picked up by YouTube's algorithm because how often I was watching this fight, or watching people react to this fight, or how often I'd listen to the song and then immediately go and watch the fight right after. So not only is this song my new favorite song for the entirety of Death Battle as a whole, but I think it's proof that this episode is my new favorite episode in the show's history, as well as the #1 episode of 2024 and 2025.
So long, Doctor!
At the time of writing this, we don't have any information on this year's premiere for 2026. Hell, the only things we know are happening this year are the fights they still need to make from the Kickstarter campaign and the Champions Island winners matchup. I don't know what 2026 will have in store for Death Battle, or for myself.
All I can say is that I hope this year goes well for everyone watching this, myself included. Take care, everyone. And hopefully, you'll be seeing more from me soon.